Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey. I am George Harvey and Tom Finnell.
Hello.
And this week we have Guy Payne over here from SEON, which is the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network. Is that correct?
That's right.
I got it right. First time ever. Guy, did you have anything in particular you wanted to say before we...
You're off and running.
Well, I wasn't sure in terms of how does the show really close.
Well, it does. It doesn't. You just keep going.
But, so I was a little surprised when you said show. Yeah, I mean, I think as you were saying, it's important, and I'd really like to explain what is the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network.
Yeah.
We go by the name of SEON.
Yeah.
What's been our contribution up to this point? And what can folks look for from us in the future? So,
Well, you've got a website.
Yes, we do.
Which is what?
www.SEON, Sustainable Energy Outreach Network.info.
.info.
.info, yeah.
All right. And your task, as I understand it, is basically putting people together.
Yeah. I mean, that's primarily what we are, and we've mentioned Upper Austria a number of times in this program, and that's exactly where we got our ideas from in terms of how to move forward.
Interesting.
Gary Goodemuth was at a conference 6-7 years ago up in Burlington in which representatives from Upper Austria came and talked about their energy cluster. And you can, if folks are interested, you can Google Energy Cluster Upper Austria and this organization will pop up. And extraordinarily successful. The challenge is that's across the pond, to be able to model yourself afterwards. What's also interesting is that the state of Vermont now has signed a memorandum of understanding with the state of Upper Austria to begin seeing how can we look at their best practices.
Yes.
And primarily focusing on biomass, whether it is the harvesting, whether it is the technology of the different systems that they have, and to see what we can do in terms of policy, in terms of economic development.
Okay.
So again, we keep going back to Upper Austria, and probably for many folks, Vermont's relationship with Austria has been significant since.
That's interesting.
Since the 1930s.
1930s.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we also get the traps and the ski instructors.
Oh yes.
Oh,
Stein Erickson.
So the relationship with Austria has
it goes back to the Sound of Music and before.
Goes back. Yeah, before Sound of Music.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and so that's where we got our ideas from in terms of, so what does a networking organization accomplish when it's primarily business driven? And that's really who our members are. There might be a few sort of public sector folks who sort of join, but it's primarily business driven. They have the skin in the game.
Okay. We have reached the end of our hour, and so I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for joining us to those of you who have joined us on broadcast through BCTV, but for those of you who are on the web watching this, we're just going to continue.
Okay.
As long as Guy is willing to put up with us. So you were saying.
I was saying, yeah. So we modeled ourselves after, I mean, the idea was we are a networking organization and not a project management that says we want to put wind turbines on X or this. So it's really, how do we facilitate the energy that comes out when you put people together?
Right.
And, that gets to be a little mushy, like, so what really happens?
Yes.
And really, we then turn to, up in Kingston, Ontario, an organization you probably heard me mention, Switch, SWITCH, which stands for nothing other than switch on and switch off. And they love to point fingers to Vermont and say, we're not an acronym. So what did we do? We formed an acronym, SEON.
Yeah.
But really what we are and what we believe is here in southeastern Vermont, we're too far away from, well, it may sound strange, but we're too far away from Burlington or from Boston for people to take time off from work to take advantage of what may be presented there. And there's some great, the nonprofits there, whether it's Renewable Energy Vermont, whether it's Montpelier, a lot goes on up in there. But our businesses down here are small. But there's an expertise here that is tremendous.
Tremendous.
So how do we harness that sort of local and build I'm very much a systems thinker.
Mm-hmm.
So
your background is?
My background is in organizational development. So it is not energy.
Okay, but
these businesses say, Guy, that's fine. We need that.
Yeah.
We'll handle, with yours and Tom and everybody else, we'll handle the energy side.
Yeah.
It's just we need someone to shepherd us around.
Yeah.
And to focus. So what we've done, what we are, is a local concentration of interrelated businesses, educational institutions, and private sector enthusiasts, really, all committed to the economic sustainability of the region, but primarily focusing on the development and commercialization of renewable energy, energy efficiency, products, services, processes, technologies. So how do we grow this market? And we see southeastern Vermont as really being, down the road, one of the foremost centers of renewable energy for rural America.
As you were talking about this, it struck me. The fact that we are too far from Burlington and Boston and a number of other places too, New Haven perhaps, and Albany, may be an asset.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, Peter Temple he's a faculty member over at Keene State and a strong supporter of the work that we're doing. And I think sometimes people don't realize the expertise that is here. And so many institutions will look to the engineering firms in Boston. They know how to heat buildings, and some of their ideas were old ideas when Keene State and some of the new ones because we have an expertise in air source heat pump areas, and some of the initial designs, energy efficiency designs of the buildings that the Bostons and the New Yorks, you can't heat buildings with air source heat pumps.
What?
You can't do that. And then they finally,
Who says that?
Those firms in Boston and New York. And Lewis and Kohler over in Keene, their buildings.
If I could interrupt here for just a second, in case any viewer wants to know about this. All right, we've been writing. I write for Green Energy Times,
right?
Which I haven't. Sorry, Nancy Ray, haven't said it yet. But I write for Green Energy Times, and one of the things that we've been really going into in the last few issues is air source heat pumps, and we've got another one coming up in the next issue, which is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. A building that has ground source heat pump, and this is a building that's self-heating because the heat pump is powered by PVs that are on the building.
Right.
And the efficiency level that you can get from these heat pumps is extremely high.
That's right.
And if you want to compare it with a radiant heater, an electric radiant heater that you plug into the wall that most people are familiar with, that radiant heater converts 100% of the energy that goes into it that you pay for into a heat. So it's rated at 100% efficiency. Now, when you compare the air source heat pump, which is basically, it works on the same technology as an air conditioner, but it's moving heat, it's not creating heat. And because it's moving heat rather than creating heat, it can do it much at a different level of efficiency. And the air source heat pump, if you want to put it in terms of the efficiency of the radiant heater, can operate at 250 to 350% of efficiency. Right. So you can get, in terms of dollars spent on heat, you can get 2.5 to 3.5 times as much heat per dollar than you can get out of a radiant heater. Radiant heaters are expensive. They're 2.5 to 3.5 times as expensive as wood, for example, in a wood stove, which means that you can run an air source heat pump for about the same price as heating your house with cordwood. And that's about as low as you can get. If you'd want to do it with a ground-sourced heat pump, you get maybe 400% efficiency. It's more expensive to put in, right, but you're running cheaper than cordwood. And when you throw on top of that if you gasify the wood, turn it into electricity, and use that to power these heat pumps, you can get more BTUs out of wood by converting it to electricity and turning it, you're running heat pumps, than by burning it as wood. Yeah. We're in a different age. And if the guys down in Boston don't know, they just don't know.
Well, they've learned from the experts that are here that you can do that.
Isn't that smart?
So we were talking about that local group, you know.
There are places in Europe where they're saying if you're going to build a building, it's got to be heated with heat pumps.
Over in Japan, this has been technology they've known for years.
Years.
Why it's taken so long to get here is a fascinating. We can all conjecture as to
we can conjecture. I happen not to be one of those people who's into conspiracy theory, but I'll blame the fossil fuel industry anyway.
Well, I think, just following up on the air source heat pump, Alex Wilson in his article this week in the Reformer did a whole piece on heat pumps. We turned SEON and Brattleboro Climate Protection sponsored back in November, whole open forum on air source heat pumps, and Peter Temple, who's the faculty member, did the presentation. There were representatives from Mitsubishi and Fujitsu there, as well as funding sources from Vermont State Employee Credit Union, via CCU. And that was taped, and that is online at BCTV.
Okay.
So you can go right online. You don't have to worry about what the schedule is.
Yeah.
So you can go into the archives.
Yeah.
They can go to our website and go to our blog and see what that connection is.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and as well as Peter Temple and Eric Webster did another presentation for our Building Science Guild on heat pumps. So this is getting to be quite one of the major innovations, I think, that would be significant for organizations, for homes as well.
Yeah.
And based on that, a lot of families, based on these presentations that have gone on, a lot of families have made these changes.
Well, I got hit by a propane bill the other day. And one of the problems that I've got with my propane bills, and I know this is going to sound a little weird, is that I've turned the thermostat down. The apartment that I rented originally had no insulation. It's got insulation, which was done by Sevka, and it was done very nicely. And then my landlord put in window inserts so that there's that extra protection there. And the result of this is that the propane use went down a lot. And in fact, it declined by about 3/4. I'm using a tiny amount of propane compared to what I used to. My thermostat is very low. And I've actually found that this winter I've been comfortable at 50 degrees, which I would never suggest to other people. Because, but here I am. If you think about it, it makes sense. You see, the surface of a volume is most efficiently covering that volume if the volume is a sphere. You have the least amount of surface. So if you're radiating heat out of a sphere, that's the most efficient shape to retain heat. And my body is more closely related to a sphere than most people's. So I retain heat, and I'm comfortable in cooler temperatures. But even so, the problem was, having cut my propane use, I was suddenly confronted with the cost of propane at $5.25 a gallon. Yeah. And this is a deal breaker as far as propane is concerned. So my landlord, my landlady, who is also a very close friend of mine, said, you know, you should really look into this and see about not air-source heat pumps, but just radiant heaters, electric heaters. She said, you've got 2 radiant heaters. Why aren't you using them? And I said, because they're expensive. She said, do the calculation. How do they compare with $5.25 for propane? Mm-hmm. So I went and I found out that the radiant heater, the propane would deliver the equivalent of per gallon of 27 kilowatt hours. When I did the calculation on 27 kilowatt hours and what that costs, it turns out that it's well below $5 a gallon. But when you consider that the radiant heater is 100% efficient, and this beautiful Renine unit that I've got is only about 75% efficient, the price at which there's a trade-off there becomes well under $4 per gallon. So why am I burning propane when I've got the equipment, which was very cheap to buy, for radiant heat? When you get into that kind of business of calculation, I could cut my heating bill by more than half just by converting to an air-sourced heat pump, which is an expensive thing to buy, but you know it's not.
Well, I mean, a 9,000, I think a 9,000 BTU unit installed is around 2,500 to 3,500.
9,000 BTUs.
Right.
Okay.
And I suspect, I don't know the size of your apartment, but that may be an interesting thing for you.
It would be an interesting thing to look at. Now, this is from a local installer.
Yeah, that was a question that I asked.
This is from a member of SEON.
Well, I asked Mitsubishi and Fujitsu.
Okay.
What is?
Are they local?
What are the costs? Well, yes. Who would be local would be. I mean, you can go to Efficiency Vermont's website and find out who are the certified installers of air source heat pumps.
Now we're telling everybody how to do this.
And Art Mechanical is one of those. I'm not sure who some of the others are, but if you go to Efficiency Vermont's website,
okay, Efficiency Vermont,
you can find who the certified installers are.
Yeah, and they could cut the price that a person who, like me, is paying for propane down to a point where it's really just a fraction, and a rather small fraction.
And there are you can actually, I think on the probably the Fujitsu and Mitsubishi websites, I suspect there are ways for you to do some of your own kinds of calculations. You would suspect that. And there are. I just don't have that connection or link. But circling back, though, if we could, you know, we spent time on the air source heat pump. But one of the points that I wanted to make with that is, granted, we are primarily business driven in the sense that the members are businesses.
Right.
We still make it a policy and a practice to offer open forums to the public.
Right.
So we worked with Tad Montgomery on the. On bringing Bob Walker down. I forget. Oh boy, this is terrible. I can't remember. She's the vice chair of the House Energy and
Margaret Cheney.
Margaret, yeah, Cheney. Down, and they spoke. We've also had the air source heat pump. We had the biomass the other night.
Right.
So there's a community outreach that we're doing.
Yeah, that biomass thing was very good, by the way.
It was excellent.
Yeah.
And so there's always the outreach to the community. But our primary focus is how do we work with the business community to improve their overall profitability. What has emerged as a result of Irene, really a sense of urgency that came, was that many of the contractors in the area, they understand efficiency. What they don't understand is water and vapor management.
Yes.
Some of the adverse effects of buildings, you know, mold and moisture and all. And so as a result of that, contractors got together, as well as architects, as well as building suppliers, and we formed what's known as the Building Science Guild. And really what it is, as you know, it's the physics of how air, heat, and moisture move within the house, along with other things. But it's the level of science now that is part of the construction industry is significant. And so these are individuals who have studied a course developed by Peter Yost of Building Green, who's been...
We've got the most amazing resources.
It's incredible. Yeah, this is the country's former, electronic publishing company, on green buildings, as well as one of the premier instructors right here in Brattleboro. And this group not only has formed to continue their work on building science, but they meet monthly for 3 hours, and they discuss. And these are all competitors,
yes,
with one another.
Yes.
You wouldn't know it when they gather, and they discuss their issues, their projects. They get feedback, and we are now being recognized by some major companies. In one company, Knopf, in Indiana, to come here and have this group do a test of some of their products. So we established Jonathan Morse and Steve Mendel's crew built a small wall unit, and we wrapped this unit with this product and gave feedback. So we're now being looked on as a valuable resource to give feedback on new product development.
Now the "we" here
is the Building Science Guild.
Building Science Guild,
which is a subgroup of SEON.
SEON. Okay.
We're now in, and I said this the other night at the meeting. We've been asked for help in revising the state curriculum in the building trades in terms of the competencies, as well as the state curriculum, because there's not enough green information and principles in that curriculum. And that's outrageous if that's where we are.
Well, we're in it.
That really needs to shift, because the incoming students need to recognize that this is no longer power equipment and banging nails.
Yes, absolutely. That's
putting
true.
up a frame.
Yeah.
There's science to this.
Yes.
This is science-based, mathematically based, and we can't allow kids to have magical thinking.
That's true.
To think that I can go out and earn a living and build a family if I don't understand these concepts.
Yes.
And so we've been asked to assist with that at a very small level. To the extent how that will move forward, I don't know yet. I mean, we have plans that it's a little premature to say.
Yeah.
But that's another piece. So the other night, we're going to continue certainly with the green building, with the Building Science Guild, but now we also look at the biomass and see this as another opportunity for the renewables. And how can we work with that overall supply chain to see now how can we help this group and facilitate. We're not going to be the drivers one, mainly, but it's how do we form a network similar to the Building Science Guild, to move this forward.
For biomass.
For biomass, yeah. And then there will be the PV side. There will be, so it's all aspects of the renewable energy and energy efficiency.
I was very interested in the biomass forum that you had the other night to learn that Windham County,
isn't it amazing? Yeah, go ahead.
Windham County has got an enormous biomass resource. And it was interesting to me, it was especially interesting to hear people who came from outside our county, people from the state, for example, to come to Windham County and tell us about the things that they had been learning about Windham County by doing their state-based analysis. But Windham County has got a tremendous amount of forest. Windham County has
93%.
93%. And the figures for the number, for example, of tons, green tons of wood that could be produced, is the number of tons that could be produced is probably a multiple of what we would need to heat and produce electricity for the town of Brattleboro, for example. Yeah. Which means that we've got this local resource that we could use without destroying it. operating it as
they were
sustainably as
saying
possible.
Our growth rate, which has to do with new growth as well as the growth, new versus just wider girth now.
Yes,
trees,
right.
is higher than the state average.
Yes.
1.9 versus 1.5, I think,
Yeah.
percent. So there's a great deal of sustainability that is built into
Yes,
the forest.
there is.
And you know, when they said, I think it was like 33% of all of the milling that is done in the state is done right here in Windham County.
Yeah.
Just drive down Route 142.
Yeah, right.
Well, you got
but
Allard and
Allard and Sasasimo.
This is a resource that, I mean, I tell people about Windham County, and I say there's a lot of people who know about energy in Windham County because there's a lot of people who were protesters against Vermont Yankee, who learned about power protesting against Vermont Yankee. You're talking about something which is entirely different. You're talking about something which is completely economically driven, which is based on resources that are already being used, could be used more,
well, I think,
and could be extended in terms of what use we can make of them.
what's interesting and probably the challenge for us is I think they were saying that the average acreage forested is like 50 acres per household.
Yes.
Not per household, but
The average size lot was,
Lot
50,
was
50 acres.
and part of it is, so what is the mindset of those owners?
Yes.
And I think one of the significant things is and I want to be careful that we don't make someone coming. I came from New Jersey, so someone come from the urban areas, but they were saying all too often folks don't think of the working landscape when they're buying 50 acres of
That's
land.
right.
That to them it's pristine forest, and
Right.
that's what they want to preserve, when in fact here we are in Vermont as a working landscape. Our culture is how do we begin using this in a productive and wise and sustainable way.
Right.
So there's a whole educational piece that will go along.
One of the things that amazes me is how forestry has changed over the years. You know, my earliest childhood memories are from a house in Winchester, New Hampshire, on a mountaintop, you know, and that property stayed in the family for years and years and years. It was only sold about 10 years ago. And the attitude that I had as a child was that this was, you know, it might as well have been virgin forest. It wasn't. It had been farm several generations before, but, you know, we had loggers come in because the taxes were high and the land had no production. And I think that people who come into Vermont from outside are usually buying property that has been used for some purpose, very often been forested and harvested, and that's what people, as you said, in Vermont are used to. But the shock that they feel when they think in terms of, it was something that I was very familiar with because I used to play in those woods, and then all of a sudden the trees that I knew were stumps, you know. And if it can be done properly, it is sustainably, then the forest can actually be improved by the forester while it's being harvested. And that's something that people really should understand. I read an article recently about a forest that was being preserved as a forest, and the rule that they had, you know, was managed land. The rule they had was nothing was going to be removed from this, nothing. And the forest was being preserved because it had this beautiful stand of enormous ancient trees on it. Well, the ancient trees started dying. And what were they being replaced by? Was some other species. And so this managed forest just disappeared. And that's another thing that people have to understand. You have to manage it actively. Yeah. You can't manage it by saying we're not going to do anything.
Right.
Well, I think a properly managed forest benefits everybody.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Benefits the animals, benefits the people.
Yeah.
Hiking trails are nicer through a managed forest than they are through a forest that's full of undergrowth. I mean, I've known some people that have done it, done a very good job of it, and it's quite impressive. You know, they sell some wood, but basically they enjoy the forest that they own.
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly can be done, and it can be done in a way that doesn't harm anybody.
Well, I think there was, you know, cycling back to Upper Austria again. I mean, the reason they
All roads go to Upper Austria.
Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
But, you know, here is an energy poor country.
Yeah, you can say that again.
In terms of access to the fossil fuels. So they had to look at what their assets were. And I think Adam Sherman of the Biomass Energy Resource Center, who was one of the speakers on Tuesday night, I think he said that Upper Austria is about 50% forested.
Yeah.
And so they are very aggressive in the way in which they do manage their forests to keep this biomass industry viable and sustainable.
They were 50% forested. Their population density is, I don't remember, but the impression that I have is at about 5 times what it is for Vermont. And they're getting a lot out of those forests. They're getting a lot of energy out of those forests.
Yeah.
And they're managing the forests sustainably in the process, which means what we've got here is really an underutilized resource that we could make better, not only in terms of what we get out of it, but in terms of its health.
And their boiler systems are, from what folks say, are some of the finest. And for me, I mean, there's all part of a strong registered apprenticeship program. You know, they all come out of their precision manufacturing base. And for many of the owners of those facilities, the workers are the jewels.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are pearls, as one person said.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful way.
Yeah.
So, but cycling back, I think it's that, you know, the notion of forest management, and we had a number of foresters now. I mean, I've got a database now of all the foresters from putting together this workshop on Tuesday. Some were there. You know, there were state foresters, there were private foresters who were there. So it was an exciting night.
It was good. It was good. Yeah, it was good. Now you said that you were going. You have. I just want to fix in my mind the subgroups that you've got. You've got the one subgroup which is.
This is the Building Science Guild.
Building Science Guild.
And I'm going to put a plug here because I'm starting to get questions as to, so who are the green builders? You know, the public is asking me.
Yeah.
Is asking SEON. And there are excellent green builders who are not members of SEON.
Yes.
But I can tell the public that if you go to our website and look at who our members are, who are the builders, they can rest assured that they are green builders. You know, these are the people that have studied with Peter Yost. They continue to meet monthly, so they can rest assured.
And you know, people should understand that to give green builders in general a plug, you can have a building that is built as a house that's built as a green building for not much more money.
Absolutely.
In fact, possibly for the same amount of money. And you can have a building. I think Nancy Ray Mallory told me, she's the editor of Green Energy Times, that when she built her house, it cost no more than a relatively energy efficient ordinary house. But the difference is that her house is passive solar. Mm-hmm. And she has built it a little bit over what is needed. Yeah. It's off-grid. She's got more electricity than she can possibly use. And she said that she is not a big person, and she likes to have a house that's about 72 degrees. And it's very often warm enough that she has to open the windows in the winter.
Yeah,
and she uses no fuel. Mm-hmm. And she uses no electricity. And she, you know, I mean, she has almost no impact on the environment. Yeah. But there she is in a house that really didn't cost very much more. The PVs cost extra, but you know.
The other thing that I would also encourage the public to know, and I don't think this is well known, is that Vermont has an energy code. And this applies to residential buildings, whether they're new buildings, additions, renovations, and all. That on completion, your contractor has to fill out it's a certificate of compliance. There's a technical name to it called the Residential Energy Rebase, Residential Building Energy Standards. And that contractor has to complete that form. Should be down on the fuse box or your electrical panel, your electric panel. So a copy is given to the homeowner, a copy is given to the town clerk, and a copy is sent to the Public Service Board. I am sure not enough of that is done.
Oh, yeah.
And not that that code is passive solar, or it's not going to be a passive house.
Right.
It's really the bare minimum, and your green builders will build higher and better than that. But for the public, the public needs to recognize, is your builder building according to the code? And they should not, that's state law. Now the challenge is it's not enforced.
Right.
And there are pros and cons. The more enforcement you have, the higher the indirect costs of doing business.
Right.
And what we'd like to do is have it so that it's the decision of the builder to build according to.
Well, it's the decision of the person who's hiring the builder. The person who's hiring the builder should be able to say, I want you to build this according to code.
They should. But that's not, most folks are unaware of that.
Yeah.
And they may think electrical code, they may think plumbing code, but they don't think energy code.
Energy code.
And that is there. And the other side to that is that there are some people who've tried to sell their house, and the sale has not gone through because they could not produce the certificate of compliance.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
There's your enforcement.
There's your enforcement. As well as some lending institutions want to have those certificate of compliance for construction loans.
Yep.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a piece that the Building Science Guild certainly wants, and Efficiency Vermont wants us to encourage the public to know.
I wonder if it would make sense to encourage, to survey lenders and see if they require that, and encourage the ones who don't require it to start requiring it.
Yeah. I'm already following up on that.
Are you?
Yeah.
And
at the bare minimum, they should at least let the public know when they're coming. They're not. If someone wants a home equity loan, and that's a lot of times the way some of the efficiencies are really funded. So the bank doesn't have anything. They're not going to say yes or no, based on a code. But at least your loan officer should encourage the public to know of the presence of the energy code, just as a customer service.
Yes.
And so we are pursuing, I'm speaking with lending institutions about if there's a construction loan, is this something you want to have?
Does that loan use the HERS standard?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Or that I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was kind of intrigued to see the HERS standard because I was writing about this and I needed to know exactly how it worked. And what I found was that it's based on a percentage of the cost of maintaining, heating the house and so forth, related to the standard building that was built to standard. And so if your house is HERS 100, that means that it's built to standard.
Yeah.
If it's HERS
It will stop.
if it's higher than that, that means that it's not to standard.
Yeah.
And if standard is 100, if it's HERS 0, that means you don't use any energy at all. And it's amazing to me sometimes. I come across houses that are like HERS negative 22. I actually came across one of these things.
Wow.
And it was built down in Devons, Massachusetts. And you know, somebody was saying, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means that if you build a standard house, all right, and you put it in there, and it's using the amount that, and then you build 5 of these things in a row, those 5 houses are going to produce enough power extra to power that house. You know, we're in a different world than we used to be. People can start actually living without. I don't want to say living without power, because, you know, 150 years ago, people were living without electricity and without oil and without, you know. But that house in New Hampshire, when my grandmother bought it, was off-grid and used no power aside from what was in the kerosene lamps. But, you know, no off-site power. It used firewood. Yeah. But we're getting into a point now where technology is catching up. Mm-hmm. We don't need the fossil fuels anymore, and we can produce our own electricity. It's very democratic. You know.
It's an interesting way of putting that.
Well,
yeah.
People are coming to a point where they can be energy independent, which is exactly why the fossil fuel industry is trying to put down solar and wind, because they don't want people to be democratic.
Duh.
Now, part of my family is, or not my family, but a friend of mine is down in New York City and works in the financial areas and works for the fossil fuel industry. And so, boy, you can just hear the arguments. Arguments of, so what are we going to do with all those solar panels when they're no longer functioning? What's the disposal, and what are we going to do to the environment as a result of that?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And, you know, also a staunch supporter of nuclear power. What if we had been investing in nuclear power for the past 30 years? Couldn't we be a lot farther along than we are today? In
nuclear power we could, but I'm not sure that we'd have as much.
But there's a real strong emphasis on how to continue the promotion of the fossil fuel.
Well, there is. There's no question about it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching, I am George Harvey. This is Tom Finnell and Guy Payne from SEON, the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network. I got it right twice in a row.
Sometimes I even miss it.
See you later.